So our first recovery protocol is ice baths and I guess cold water immersion more broadly, which is a pretty common recovery technique that you see, especially at like big events, right? You got athletes sitting in lines in buckets looking calm or uncalm, depending on who they are. So let's talk a little bit about why people do that. Why physiologically do people decide to sit in cold water? Or what
Yeah,
happens when you do?
gosh. Yeah, let's answer that question. And then we'll go into like, what are benefits in just being colder.
Hmm.
People do it because it feels good. It feels bad, but it has that like really good like oh, like something had to change physiologically because of the way that I feel after. And I used to do like cold tubs every single week. I did them every single week for like 3 years. And I would just love that feeling. And in my head, I was like, this is doing something profound. Like, this is allowing me to recover. Like, my sleep is better. I'm more clear mentally. I thought it was like the miracle drug. Um, Now I don't think that way. So when we look at what does being immersed in, let's call it like an ice bath, like what does that do? It sends a crap ton of adrenaline through the body, right? There's some dopamine that can be, flushed into the system, and it makes you feel a certain kind of way. At first, you're like, this is the worst thing possible, pins and needles, it's painful, and then you kind of get used to it. And then when you get out of it, you're cold for a while and you feel like a new person, like you feel recovered. Um, so that's what it does. When we look at benefits of being cold, let's just say like decreasing our core body temperature. What are the benefits of that? There's a lot of performance benefits, whether you're an athlete or not an athlete. Let's just take something like aerobic work.
Yep.
So let's say we were going to, let's say after this, we're going to go into the gym. I feel like I use this example a lot, but after this, we're going to go into the gym and we are going to perform 60 minutes of fairly intense for 60 minutes sustained aerobic work. If my body temperature was 2 degrees, like, and our fitness levels are exactly the same, right? If my body temperature was 2 degrees higher than yours going into that 60-minute piece, that means that I am going to fatigue faster than you, right? Because when we look at, there's a lot of things that are associated with fatigue, but thermoregulation is a very, very big component of fatigue. That's why when we go out and we run in the Arizona heat, we're tired really, really quickly.
You know what comes to mind is that Murph event out in the California sun.
Yeah.
I don't know what year that was at
Yep.
the CrossFit Games, but just the amount of athletes that went down because
Mhm.
of the heat.
And the bad scores, right?
Yeah.
Like performance was way down. So when we look at aerobic capacity, and you and I were going to do that, if I was like, hold on, Georgia, you go in there and you spin on the assault bike and you warm up, I'm going to go take a cold shower, right? And then we go out there and we start at the same time and we look at, I don't know, we're wearing this like miraculous, maybe it's not that miraculous, but this wearable that tells us like our body temperature, like our core body temperature, and it's on the screen. As your core body temperature rises from where it started, fatigue is going to set in faster for you. For me, right, I'm going to be a few degrees lower than you and I'm going to be feeling great. And then when I hit that same body temperature, because we're going to hit the same body temperature maybe 30, 40 minutes in, but my performance levels are going to be higher than yours if everything else was equal. And the only difference was our core body temperature. So when we look at performance, core body temperature makes it's a huge deal, right? So that could be a protocol. That's I wouldn't recommend people taking cold showers before doing aerobic work, but it does actually make a difference, right? So the idea of like I need to warm up, I need to warm up my core body temperature, that's a huge fallacy for aerobic work. You should actually go into aerobic work cold, right? And I'm not saying like if there's like squats and cleans and all that stuff, like yeah, maybe get your joints warm and ready to go. But being colder from a core body temperature standpoint is actually a performance improver. So that would be like one thing that we could look at to be like, yes, cold water immersion or a cold shower could actually be beneficial for performance. And that also goes into anaerobics. So if we were doing back squats too,
Hmm.
right, and we were doing 15s, right, when muscles fatigue, that's mostly because of the muscles are heating up. So it's the inability to regulate that heat in the quads and in the hamstrings. So that burning feeling that we get, and we're like, oh my gosh, like I know we already talked about like that's not actually lactic acid, but it's actually more accurate to say that my muscles are getting hot because that's what's happening. That burning feeling is accurate. Your muscles are actually heating up and then you need rest so they can cool down. It's not only, oh my gosh, like I'm losing glycogen and I need 3 minutes of rest for my glycogen to restore. It's mostly your muscles are like cooling down and recovering between those sets. Sorry, you're going to say something?
Yeah, no, no. I was actually going to come in and just ask a question about anaerobic work
Oh,
specifically. So you already answered
yeah,
it, which
same
is really
idea.
helpful.
Same idea. Now, when we look at misconceptions of immersion, and we talked about this a little bit before, but um, when we get into an ice bath, what happens with our bodies is our bodies are very smart, right? Like we have intelligent bodies and they don't want our body temperature to drop too quickly. So when we get into an ice bath, we our vessels they constrict, right? So they go through that process of vasoconstriction. So what does that mean? That means that they close up. Okay. So just because we're in, I don't know, a 40-degree ice bath, doesn't mean that our core body temperature is going to go down in 3, 4, 5 minutes, like we feel it is on the surface, because that constriction occurs and that is not allowing that cold blood to find its way to our heart and then pump out. Like that's actually not what's happening. Um, and if we actually wanted to lower our core body temperature, because there are some benefits to doing that, the best way to do that would actually to be in cool water, not cold water, because everything's still dilated. Our blood is still flowing throughout our body. So now we're taking that cool water. The blood is being impacted by that cool water, and now it's flowing through our entire system. But as soon as we get into ice cold water, that constriction occurs and that barrier around the skin occurs, and that's why we get used to that ice bath, and it's not as terrible in the second minute as it was in the first minute because our bodies just adapt to it. So, if we really wanted to get those physiological benefits of immersion, we would do cool water immersions, not cold water immersions. And I'm just talking about physiological. I'm not talking about psychological. There are some benefits to getting into an ice bath and that adrenaline hitting you and the dopamine being released. So I'm not discounting those, but if we're looking at it from a physiological standpoint, yeah, get in a cool bath of water.